Okay, hello everybody. So here are the solutions to the quiz that you took. So number one, when I first saw this, I thought, oh, I'm just going to take the square root because 3x plus 1 is being squared. I'll just take the square root and be done. But then I realized, hold on a second, I can't take this. I don't want to take the square root of this because I'll have an 18x inside the radical. I don't want that. So I'm really forced to do one thing. I had to expand 3x plus 1 squared. So 3x plus 1 times 3x plus 1, and I double distribute, which gives me this trinomial. And now I've got a quadratic right here that equals something. So I'm going to set it equal to 0. And quadratic formula. I can always do quadratic formula. So I subtract 18x, I add 2, and you see these three numbers, 9, -12, and 3? They all have a 3 in common. So I can divide the left side by 3 and the right side by 3. 0 divided by 3 is just 0. But when I divide this by 3, this becomes 3x squared. This becomes minus 4x. This becomes plus 1. And then now I see, oh, this is actually factorable. This factors into 3x minus 1 times x minus 1. So my answers are a third or 1. So being good at factoring is very, very good. I would definitely do a YouTube search on how to factor to kind of freshen up your skills. However, quadratic formula will always work. So at this point right here, the quadratic formula is the opposite of b. So -4 becomes +4. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. So -4 squared minus 4 times 3 times 1. And you still get the same answers. You get +1 and 1/3. Number 2, you have to solve it by the square root property. So you want to get this x squared by itself and then take the square root. So you minus 1 on both sides. Now divide by 5. And at this point, you square root both sides. Square root the left side, square root the right side. But now, when you take the square root, you have to account for plus or minus. So +5 and -5, two different answers. Solve by completing the square. So we want to get the a term, the a and the b term alone. So I subtracted 1 on both sides. That 4 became a 3. And now underneath these black squares is what would complete the square. So I want to take half of this b term and square it. So half of -6 is -3. And if I square it, I get 9. But I have to add 9 to the other side to keep the balance. 3 plus 9 is 12. And the whole point of completing the square is it allows you to factor it into a binomial squared. X minus 3 times x minus 3 will be x squared minus 6x plus 9. And then now you do the square root property. Take the square root of both sides, making sure you account for plus or minus. If you take the square root of the left side, the square goes away, and you're just left with x minus 3. Square root of 12 is, well, plus or minus the square root of 12. But 12 is 4 times 3, so it's really plus or minus 2 rad 3. You add 3 to both sides, and then you're done. Here are the two answers, 3 plus or minus 2 rad 3. Solve by quadratic formula. This one's already set up for you. It's a quadratic that equals 0. So the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. And you get these two answers. 97 is prime. 97 cannot be broken down like 12 was. The discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So in this case, b is -34. So I square that. Minus 4 times a, which in this case is 1, times c, which is -289. And when you do all that, you get this huge number, 2,312. The only significant thing about 2,312 is that it's positive. So since the discriminant is positive, this equation has two real answers, not as opposed to imaginary, two different real answers. And if you were to graph this parabola, it would hit the x-axis at two different spots. Page 2, solve by any method you want. Unfortunately, there's, this is factored, but it equals 2. That doesn't help you. To solve by factoring, you want it to equal 0. You have to have it equal 0. So this you have to expand this. So you have to double distribute and collect like terms. Now you can set it equal to 0. Now you can try to factor it. I'm not sure if it even is factorable. I just went to the quadratic formula because it always works. And see, the discriminant is 33. That tells you that this was not factorable. Number 7, first of all, is this a function? Yes or no? The answer is yes, because every domain, which is the x value, every x value goes to one and only one y value. 3 is an x, and that goes to 8. 3 doesn't go anywhere else. -1 is the x value. It goes to 4. -1 doesn't go anywhere else, and so on and so on. Every x value goes to one range value, one y value. The domain is the set of all x values. So these 5 numbers, these are all the x's. The range is the set of all y's. These 5 numbers are all the y values. Number 8, the domain and range. Well, the domain is the set of all x values. Now here, you've got an infinite amount of x values. So you have to express it. You can't list them like I did in number 7. Here, there are only 5 x values. I could just list them. And number 8, there are infinite amounts of x values. So you have to express it as an interval. All the x values between 0 and 4, including 0, because it's a closed dot, so there's a bracket, excluding 4, because there's an open circle right there. The range is all the y values. So the lowest y value, the least y value is -9. I think I put -10. It should be -9. And the greatest y value is +7. But I mean, I'm sorry, it just goes up to +7. It doesn't include +7. That's why you've got that parenthesis. The x-intercept is where it hits the x-axis, which is 3, 0. And the y-intercept is where it hits the y-axis. And I know I screwed that up. That should be -9. It hits the y-axis at 0, -9. Last one, number 9. The domain here, well, these arrows imply that it goes in that direction forever. So it's going up, but it's also going to the left. So since it's going to the left forever, the domain includes all x values all the way to -infinity. And this arrow implies that it's going to the right all the way to +infinity. So the domain is all real numbers. The range, however, the range is the y value. So if you look down at the lowest y value, the very lowest possible y value is this y value, which is -1. And the y values just get bigger and bigger from that point on. The y values go all the way up to infinity. So that is the range, including -1 to infinity. There are 2 x-intercepts, -4 and 0. And what is f of 2? Well, f of 2 is the x value. So when x is 2, the function produces 3, +3. So f of 2 is 3.